The old two-story house in the Boston suburbs maintained an elegant exterior, but inside, traces of time remained here and there. The creaking floorboards in the entrance hall, the slight soot around the fireplace, and the worn indentations in the stair railings, all these details were precious to Mary Wilson. "Emma, breakfast time." Mary called from the kitchen while pouring orange juice into a glass. Mary was tall with an artistic appearance. Her long brown hair was always loosely tied back, and her eyes reflected intelligence and warmth. "Mommy, the clouds in the sky are making funny shapes," 6-year-old Emma called out from the window. She was a child with an active imagination who could turn even the smallest observations into adventures. "Yes, they are. But we don't have time today. Your father is busy too." Richard came downstairs holding his coffee cup. He was a man who always took care with his appearance. Tall and handsome, he showed a charming smile especially to people related to his work. "I have an important business meeting this weekend. If it's successful, it'll be a big deal," Richard said as he stroked Emma's head. "My little princess, when Daddy comes back from his business trip, I'll bring you a wonderful present. Promise?" Emma looked up at her father. "Of course," Richard winked at his daughter. Mary quietly set the table, feeling a slight uneasiness about her husband's words. Recently, Richard seemed to be hiding something. There had been subtle changes in his attitude, especially during the 3 months since her mother had passed away. "How are the preparations?"
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
For the new exhibition at the Oliver Museum? Richard asked Mary. "There's still so much to do," Mary answered. "But it's an exhibition featuring female artists of the 20th century. It's a special project for me." Mary's talent as a museum curator was widely recognized. Her passion for art had remained unchanged since childhood, and sometimes she prioritized work over family time. This occasionally became a source of Richard's discontent. "By the way, I got a call from Mother," Richard said casually. "She says she'll be visiting this weekend." Mary inwardly sighed. Her mother-in-law, Helen Wilson, was a typical upper-class woman who behaved courteously on the surface, but never tried to hide her excessive interference and attachment to her son. To Helen, Richard was the perfect son, and Mary was a daughter-in-law unworthy of him. "I see," Mary feigned calmness. "Emma will be happy about that, I suppose." In reality, Emma also had complicated feelings about her relationship with her grandmother. Helen's affection was conditional, given only when Emma behaved like a lady. After breakfast, when Richard left for work, the house became quiet. Mary was sorting through her mother's belongings, thinking about what to do with the inheritance, which was substantial, though she hadn't made any specific plans yet. "Mommy, look at this," Emma came into her mother's office. In her small hands was an old photograph. "Oh, this is a picture of Grandma and me when we were young," Mary gently took the photo. "Do you miss Grandma?" Emma nodded silently. "Grandma told me the truth." "What do you mean?" "It's a secret," Emma said with a mysterious expression. Mary thought it was probably a product of a child's imagination. In the evening, Mary received a phone call from Richard. "I've decided to leave early tomorrow morning. I need to prepare for the important business meeting." "I see," Mary replied. A strange anxiety crossed her mind. During dinner, Emma was quieter than usual. Looking out the window, her expression had a concern that was unusual for a child. "What's wrong, Emma?" Mary touched her daughter's forehead. "I saw Daddy and Grandma having a secret phone call," Emma said in a small voice. "They thought I couldn't see them." Mary was momentarily surprised by her daughter's words but quickly remembered the richness of a child's imagination. "Daddy makes a lot of work calls. Now, it's bedtime." After putting Emma to bed, Mary headed to her office to finish planning documents for the Art Foundation. However, she couldn't concentrate. Staring out into the darkness, she was overcome by an inexplicable anxiety. The next day, Richard left earlier than usual. While organizing museum materials, Mary noticed Emma looking out the window. Tension ran through her small back, and she stood frozen by the windowsill, unlike the usually active 6-year-old. "Emma, what are you looking at?" Mary approached her daughter. Emma turned slowly and stared at her mother's face. There was a deep concern in her eyes that was unchildlike. "I'm waiting for something to come." "What's coming?" Mary asked with a smile. "I don't know." "But Mommy." Emma paused for a moment. "Do you remember Grandpa's old basement?" Mary stopped moving. The basement supposedly used by Emma's great-grandfather had already been sealed off when she purchased the house. She didn't remember mentioning its existence to her daughter. "Emma, where did you hear about that?" "I saw it in a dream. There's a secret room in the basement, a place to hide when bad people come." Mary was impressed by her daughter's rich imagination but also felt uneasy. The house's survey report had indeed mentioned an old servant's basement, but it was supposedly completely sealed off and inaccessible. Yes, old big houses had places like that. But they're not used anymore, Mary explained gently. "Really?" Emma's voice was small. While preparing dinner in the kitchen, the phone rang. Seeing the name displayed on the screen, Mary hesitated for a moment. It was from her mother-in-law, Helen. "Hello, Helen," Mary put on a bright voice. "Mary, has Richard left yet?" There was an unusual tension in Helen's voice. "Yes, he left early this morning. He should have arrived by now." "I see." After a brief silence, Helen continued. "Let me know if you hear from him. I have an important matter to discuss." "Of course. Is there a problem?" "No, nothing. Just checking." Helen's voice suddenly grew cold. "And how is Emma doing?" "She's fine. A bit quiet, but..." "I see. Children often understand more than adults think they do." There was something meaningful in Helen's words. "I'll be in touch later." Right after hanging up, Mary heard the sound of a car engine around the house. Looking out the window, she saw an unfamiliar man slowly walking around the house. The man in a black coat seemed to be searching for something. "Emma." Mary hurried to the living room. "Let's not go outside today. Let's stay here and draw pictures." When night fell and Mary tried to put Emma to bed, she refused to go. "I want to sleep in your room, not here." "What's wrong? Did you have a scary dream?" Emma shook her head. "Daddy and Grandma are planning something bad. I overheard them." Mary was disturbed by her daughter's words. "Emma, that's not true. That's just your..." "It is true." Emma's voice grew a little louder. "I found house plans in Daddy's study. It said there was a secret passage. Daddy was looking at the plans while saying 'perfect' on the phone." Mary tried to calm her daughter, but Emma's serious expression made her feel anxious. "All right. Tonight we'll sleep together in my room. But tomorrow we need to talk properly about this." After putting Emma to bed, Mary called Richard. However, the call just kept ringing with no answer. As her anxiety grew, she sent Richard a message, but there was no reply. Mary picked up her mother's photo and pondered. Had her mother been concerned about Richard? Recently, in her mother's belongings, she had found a diary with the mysterious line, "Worried about R." Late at night, Mary's smartphone rang. It was a text message from Richard, coming back early tomorrow morning. "Have something important to discuss." Mary couldn't sleep, remembering Emma's words. Her daughter had a vivid imagination, but there was something different about her recent behavior. It was as if she truly knew something. Mary got up from the bed and quietly walked around the house. Richard's study door was usually locked, but tonight it was slightly open. Inside, there were neatly arranged documents on the desk, and nothing seemed unusual at first glance. But when she tried opening the drawers, the bottom drawer that was normally locked opened. Inside was an envelope labeled life insurance documents. With trembling hands, Mary opened it and checked the contents. A high-value life insurance policy newly contracted in her name. The beneficiary was Richard. The contract date was 1 week after her mother's death. "This is..." Mary murmured. She felt a chill on the back of her neck. Emma's warning suddenly seemed very real. As she was about to leave the study, she heard a car engine outside. Mary carefully peered through a gap in the blinds. A black SUV had stopped in front of the house, and an unfamiliar man got out. He was talking on his mobile phone, seemingly waiting for some signal. Mary hurried back to her room and lay down next to the sleeping Emma. Her heart was pounding rapidly. Mary woke from intermittent sleep. The morning light coming through the window was still weak, and the clock showed 5:30. She gazed at Emma's peaceful sleeping face beside her and felt somewhat relieved. However, that peace didn't last long. A faint sound caught her attention. The sound of a car door closing in front of the house. In the early morning silence, the sound resonated strangely loud. Was Richard back? What was the important talk he had mentioned? The life insurance documents she had found last night flashed through her mind. Just as Mary was about to get up, Emma's small hand firmly gripped her arm. When Mary turned, Emma was already awake, staring at her mother with a terrified expression. "Mommy." Emma's voice was trembling. "We need to escape right now." There was urgency in that small voice. Mary, confused, stared at her daughter's face. "What? Why?" Emma was clearly trembling with fear. Her small body was stiff with tension, and her eyes were moist with tears. "There's no time, we need to leave the house right now." Mary was confused. It was clear that her daughter was genuinely frightened. But what were they running from? Richard? Or the suspicious man she saw last night? Either way, Emma's fear was real. Mary instinctively felt she should trust her daughter. "All right," Mary decided. "Get dressed quickly, and only take what's necessary." She quickly took a small bag from the closet and put in cash, passports, a mobile phone, and her mother's keepsake locket. Emma hurriedly changed into her clothes and hugged her favorite stuffed animal. "Mommy, hurry," Emma urged, anxiously looking out the window. Footsteps were heard at the front door. The sound of a key turning. And then multiple footsteps. Mary's heart raced. "Emma, it seems Daddy is back," Mary said, trying to appear calm. "Do we really need to leave? Shouldn't we talk to Daddy about this?" Emma shook her head vigorously. "No. Daddy and Grandma are trying to kill Mommy. They want the money Grandma left." Mary gasped at her daughter's words. "Emma, why would you say such a..." "I heard it. Daddy was talking to Grandma on the phone." Emma's expression was serious. "Daddy said, if Mary is gone, everything becomes mine. And then, we just need to make it look like an accident." The life insurance documents she had seen last night came back to Mary's mind. A high insurance payout. Richard as the beneficiary. Contract signed right after her mother's death. And, above all, Emma's frightened expression. All of these might not be coincidences. "I understand," Mary said in a trembling voice. "Let's go down quietly. We'll leave through the back door." The two began quietly descending the stairs. However, Richard's voice could be heard from the living room. He was talking to someone. Mary stopped midway on the stairs and listened to the voices. "Is everything ready?" Richard's voice had an unfamiliar coldness. "I'm counting on you for operating the security system. Timing is crucial." Another man's voice responded. Understood. I'll activate it as soon as I get the signal. Mary froze in terror. She quickly pulled Emma's hand and headed towards the back door through the kitchen. Holding their belongings, she grabbed the doorknob. But it wouldn't turn. It won't open. Mary murmured in panic. Mommy, Emma's voice echoed softly. It's locked from the outside. At that moment, the smell of gasoline began to drift around the house. The strong odor of chemicals invaded through the windows. Simultaneously, the house's security systems suddenly began to activate. There was no alarm sound, but metal shutters installed on windows and doors started to descend all at once. It was happening. They were trapped. Emma! Mary cried out in fear. She desperately tried to find another exit. But all windows and doors were completely sealed with metal shutters. Mary was about to fall into panic, but Emma's calm voice brought her back. Mommy, this way. Emma remained calm. There's a hidden door behind the pantry. Following Emma's lead, Mary headed to the kitchen pantry. Behind the grocery shelves was a small door, not noticeable at first glance. Emma unhesitatingly moved the shelf and pulled a hidden handle. A small door opened, revealing a dark passage. Emma, this is... Mary was astonished. Neither Daddy nor Grandma know about this. I found it, Emma said proudly. Grandma told me. In my dream. Mary hesitated for a moment. The fear that this might be a trap crossed her mind. But somewhere in the house, she began to hear the sound of fire burning. The smell of smoke was gradually intensifying. She had no choice. Emma, you go first. I'll follow right behind you. Mary guided her daughter into the passage. The narrow passage seemed to be an old secret servant's passage. Dust and cobwebs hung from the ceiling, suggesting it hadn't been used for decades. The passage was so narrow that they had to crouch to proceed. Mommy, are you okay? Emma turned and asked. She didn't seem afraid. Rather, she had an expression full of certainty, as if being guided by something. I'm fine, Mary tried to smile, but her heart was pounding with fear. Questions kept surfacing in her mind. Was Richard really trying to kill her? Just for the inheritance? How did Emma know about this passage? After walking for a while, the passage gently sloped downward, continuing underground. Do you know where this leads? Mary asked. Yes. It comes out under the shed in the garden. Grandma told me. The smell of smoke grew stronger, and behind them came a loud sound like an explosion. The fire seemed to be spreading rapidly. The two hurried through the narrow passage, almost crawling. Finally, a small light appeared at the end of the passage. It was a small door embedded in the basement wall. When Emma pushed the door, it opened with a creak of rusty hinges. Beyond it was the underground space of a shed a little distance from the house. Hurry, Mary lifted Emma and rushed up the shed stairs. When they opened the shed door, the fresh morning air greeted them. Looking back, the house was already engulfed in flames. Black smoke rose high into the sky, and the sound of sirens was approaching the neighborhood. Mommy, let's go to Barbara's house, Emma suggested. Barbara was Mary's close friend who lived 2 houses away. Mary held Emma tightly. Emma, you saved my life. Emma looked up at her mother's face. There was an adult-like calmness in her eyes. Grandma is watching over us. She knew about Daddy's plan. Mary trembled at her daughter's words. There was a certainty about them that seemed beyond a child's imagination. The two hurried to Barbara's house. Barbara was just making her morning coffee. When she opened the door, there stood Mary and Emma, soiled with soot. Their expressions were etched with an indescribable terror. Mary! What happened? Barbara quickly invited them inside. Barbara, call the police, Mary's voice was trembling. Richard, set fire to the house, tried to kill us." Though the words were hard to believe, Barbara didn't hesitate to reach for the phone. Outside the window, black smoke was already rising, and the sound of sirens was approaching. By the time the police and fire trucks arrived, the Wilson house was already engulfed in flames. As firefighters battled the fire, officers took statements from Mary and Emma. Mary, though confused, insisted that this was not an accidental fire but a premeditated attempted murder. "Ma'am, that's a serious allegation," an older detective said. "Do you have any evidence?" With trembling hands, Mary took out her mobile phone. "Last night, I took pictures of life insurance documents I found in my husband's study. Recently, he took out a high-value policy in my name." The detective looked at the photo and frowned. "This alone is not enough. Also, my daughter Emma overheard my husband's conversation." Mary placed her hand on Emma's shoulder. Emma began speaking in a small voice. "Daddy was talking to Grandma on the phone. He said, 'If Mary is gone, everything becomes mine.' Then he said, 'The trick is to make it look like an accident.'" The detective looked at Emma kindly. "When and where did you hear this?" 3 days ago. Outside Daddy's study, Emma answered the details accurately. "Daddy was talking on the phone and didn't notice me. Then he was looking at the old house plans. He said, 'The security system modification is complete.' By the afternoon, the situation at the scene had changed drastically. The fire investigator announced preliminary findings. This is clearly arson. Traces of gasoline were detected around the house. Furthermore, the security system was deliberately modified to allow remote locking of windows and doors from the outside. Detectives hurried to locate Richard Wilson. It quickly became apparent that his claimed business trip was a lie. His colleagues at work testified, "We hadn't heard Richard was going on a business trip." In the evening, Richard was found at a gas station on the interstate highway and arrested. Documents for identity fraud and a large amount of cash were found in the trunk of his car. "I'm innocent," Richard shouted in the interrogation room. "This was all my mother's plan. She coerced me." Helen Wilson was also arrested at her home. At first, she maintained her composure, but when she learned that Richard was blaming her, her attitude changed completely. "That ungrateful son. I sacrificed everything for him." As the investigation progressed, the full extent of the horrific plan was revealed. Richard was actually in serious financial trouble. His position at the investment company was just for show, and he had been in debt for many years. Additionally, he had a mistress and was planning to start a new life using the inheritance left by Mary's mother. "It seems he had been living a double life for years," the detective explained to Mary. "After your mother's death, he set his sights on her estate. He seems to have become impatient when you didn't decide what to do with the assets." "I wonder if my mother noticed something," Mary murmured. Surprisingly, evidence was found in Mary's mother's diary showing that she had noticed Richard's true nature. There was an entry stating, "Richard approached me about an investment, but I declined after learning his company was in financial trouble." She had been trying to warn Mary but died suddenly from illness. The trial began 3 months later. The prosecution presented extensive evidence. Numerous planned conversations between Richard and Helen were discovered on Richard's mobile phone, revealing detailed plans to make Mary and Emma appear to have died in an accident. The defendant, Richard Wilson, meticulously planned to kill his wife and daughter to obtain the inheritance, the prosecutor addressed the jury. He modified the house's security system and executed the cold-blooded plan of trapping his wife and daughter and setting fire to the house. The defense tried to question Richard's mental state, but he suddenly changed strategy and tried to place all responsibility on Helen. "Mother was manipulating me. I couldn't escape her control." However, this strategy backfired. Helen was infuriated and testified surprisingly frankly about her years of doting on and controlling her son, as well as her own role in this plan. "I was determined to do anything for my son's happiness." Mary wasn't worthy of him. I thought if she was gone, Richard could achieve the success he was meant for. But the most important witness at the trial was Emma. With a composure far beyond her years, she testified about overhearing her father and grandmother's conversation, finding the house plans, and being told about the existence of the secret passage in a dream by Grandma. "Who is this grandma you're referring to?" the prosecutor asked. "Mommy's mommy," Emma answered simply. "She told me that Daddy was planning something bad." A quiet emotion spread among the jurors. The pure belief and courage of a 6-year-old girl had saved 2 lives. Ultimately, both Richard and Helen were found guilty. Richard was sentenced to 15 years for attempted arson and attempted murder, while Helen received an 8-year sentence for conspiracy. Outside the courthouse, Mary held Emma tightly. "You saved our lives, Emma." Emma looked up at her mother. "Mommy, it's just the 2 of us now, isn't it?" "No, we have each other," Mary smiled. "And it seems Grandma is watching over us too." They walked away hand in hand. 6 months after the trial, on an autumn afternoon, Mary was looking out the window of her new home at the garden where fallen leaves were dancing. This house, purchased in a small town in the Boston suburbs, was much smaller than their former luxurious mansion, but it was filled with warmth. "Mommy, look." Emma came home from school and showed her a drawing. "The teacher said my picture will be in the art exhibition." Mary took her daughter's drawing. It depicted 3 women, Mary, Emma, and Mary's mother. "Wonderful, Emma. Grandma would be happy too." Emma smiled. "Mommy, I'm glad I told you to escape that day." "Me too," Mary embraced her daughter. Since that incident, Emma had shown remarkable resilience with the help of the psychological counselor, Michael Foster. She had made friends at her new school and was beginning to develop her artistic talents. Mary herself had also resumed her work at the Oliver Museum while dealing with her emotional wounds. She was also advancing plans to establish a foundation to support young female artists, using part of the inheritance from her mother. "Have you decided on a name for the new foundation?" Emma asked. "I'm thinking of calling it Reverse Dream." "It means a first step towards a new dream," Mary answered with a smile. Meanwhile, Richard's days in prison were bleak. He repeatedly applied for sentence reduction, continuing to claim, "It's a false accusation created by my wife's delusions and my daughter's imagination." However, the evidence presented by the prosecution was overwhelming. His colleagues at his company also testified about his years of dishonesty and lies. Most ironic was the collapse of the relationship between Richard and his mother, Helen. Richard's blaming of his mother during the trial had created an irreparable rift between them. Helen was isolated in prison and was called the most pitiful prisoner. She only repeated to other inmates, "It was for my son." One day, Mary was doing a final sort of her mother's belongings. Among old notebooks, she found an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from her mother stating, "Richard approached me about an investment, but I declined. I found out his company was in financial trouble." The date was 2 weeks before her mother's death. Mary submitted this letter to the police. This led to an additional investigation into Richard, and suspicions began to surface regarding her mother's death as well. The cause of death, thought to be natural. Mary tried to push away that thought. On Christmas Eve, Mary and Emma were spending time in front of the fireplace. Emma's psychological counselor, Michael, had also been invited, and the 3 shared a warm evening together. Over the past 6 months, Michael had gradually become part of Mary and Emma's lives. At first professionally, then as a friend, and now as someone like family. "Mommy," Emma suddenly asked. "What is a real family?" Mary thought for a moment and answered gently, "It's not about blood ties, but about caring for and protecting each other." Emma nodded as if understanding and said, "That's why we were able to become a real family." After thinking a bit more, she continued, "Weren't Grandma and Daddy family? They loved each other, but it wasn't a healthy love, Mary explained gently. True love means wishing for the other's freedom and happiness. It's not about using someone for your own desires. Emma looked at Michael and smiled. What about Michael? Can Michael become part of our family? The two adults exchanged glances, and Mary's cheeks turned red. Michael smiled gently and replied, "That's something we'll all talk about someday." Snow had quietly begun falling outside the window. A sense of anticipation for a new year and a new beginning enveloped this small house. Mary held Emma tightly. Your courage created our new life. With these words, they were taking a step towards a bright future. The Wilson family's white two-story house stood quietly in the lush suburban neighborhood of Boston. November morning had arrived, with fallen leaves accumulating in the front yard, signaling the end of autumn and the coming of winter. Deborah stood by the window, resting both hands on her heavily pregnant belly as she took slow, deep breaths. For her, this pregnancy was a miracle after 7 years of fertility treatments. After numerous failures and moments of despair, this baby was conceived just when she had nearly given up hope. Every morning, Deborah offered prayers of gratitude for this precious life. Mom, look at my science project. Lily's cheerful voice echoed from the living room. Deborah slowly descended the stairs and gazed at the solar system model her 8-year-old daughter proudly displayed. The project, with its accurate planetary placement and proportional sizes, reflected Lily's delicate sensibility and intellectual curiosity. It's wonderful, Lily. You've really paid attention to every detail, Deborah smiled, gently stroking her daughter's brown curls. Lily looked pleased that her mother had praised her work. She excelled in school, with teachers recognizing her particular talents in science and art. She had a vivid imagination and occasionally surprised people with her mature behavior. Are you going to show it to Dad? Will he be home late? At Lily's question, Deborah's expression clouded momentarily. Her husband Michael worked as a sales manager at a medical equipment manufacturer and had become increasingly busy lately. He traveled frequently, spending less and less time at home. Dad said he has an important meeting with clients, so he'll be late today. But you can definitely show him tomorrow morning, Deborah spoke gently to her daughter, though small worries swirled inside her. Michael had been noticeably tired lately, with family conversations becoming less frequent.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
He seemed genuinely happy about the birth of their second child, but there was something unsettled about him that concerned her. Deborah herself had worked for years as a library curator but had taken leave on her doctor's orders after entering the late stages of pregnancy. Being forced to rest at home was difficult for her active nature, but safely delivering the baby was her top priority. In the afternoon, Deborah prepared a light dinner for Lily while reviewing her pre-birth checklist. 1 week until her due date. The hospital bag was almost ready, and the newborn clothes were washed and folded. They had already decided on the name Thomas, after Michael's father. The sound of the front door opening was followed by the patter of Lily's feet rushing to greet someone. It seemed Michael had unexpectedly returned home early. Dad! Look at my solar system. Lily's excited voice was followed by Michael's tired laugh. That's amazing, Lily. You really have talent. Deborah emerged from the kitchen to welcome her husband. Michael's face showed signs of fatigue, his tie was loosened, and his shirt collar was wrinkled. He approached his wife, smiling at her large belly, and gave her a light kiss. The meeting ended earlier than expected. How are you feeling? I'm fine. My back hurts a little, but the doctor says that's normal. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, the couple relaxed in the living room watching television. Michael put his arm around Deborah's shoulder and buried his face in her hair. Deborah, I'm truly happy I met you. Deborah was slightly surprised by this sudden sentimental remark. Michael then began discussing plans for after the birth. His parents lived far away and would have difficulty visiting right after the delivery, and Deborah's parents couldn't travel long distances due to health reasons. They concluded that their friend Carol would be their most reliable support. Late that night, Deborah suddenly woke to intense pain. Labor had begun, a full week before her due date. Michael was scheduled to leave for a 2-day business trip the next morning but quickly began preparing. "I'll call Carol," Deborah said, fighting through the pain. "You should go on your trip. This might take a while." Michael looked hesitant but eventually agreed to Deborah's suggestion. Carol arrived promptly and would take Deborah to the hospital. Before leaving, Lily, with half-sleepy eyes, said in a small voice, "Mom, Dad, please come back soon with the baby." By the time they reached the hospital, the contractions were coming closer together. The delivery seemed to be progressing faster than expected. Carol contacted the hospital and informed Michael of the situation. After intense pain and a long labor, Deborah gave birth to a healthy boy, Thomas Wilson. The tiny life breathed quietly in her exhausted arms. A day after giving birth, Deborah lay quietly in her hospital bed. Postpartum fatigue and pain still lingered throughout her body, but the presence of little Thomas sleeping in the bassinet beside her provided comfort. Morning light streamed through the window, announcing the start of a new day. The door was knocked on, and Michael entered with a bouquet of flowers. He had returned immediately from his business trip after receiving news of the birth and rushed to his wife and son. "Deborah, you did so well. He's perfect." Michael gently picked up Thomas and gazed at him in admiration. However, Deborah sensed something odd about Michael's behavior. He seemed happy about his son, but he appeared restless, occasionally glancing toward the hallway. "Is something bothering you?" When Deborah asked, Michael hastily shook his head. "No, nothing. I'm just waiting for a call from the office. They're still contacting me despite the situation. I'm sorry." His explanation was reasonable, but Deborah's intuition told her otherwise. Their conversation was interrupted by a nurse entering the room. She wore a name tag that read, Rachel, and began checking on Deborah's condition with a bright smile. "How are you feeling this morning, Mrs. Wilson? Has the pain subsided?" Rachel checked Deborah's blood pressure, giving Michael a friendly smile. Michael merely nodded briefly to her before quickly averting his eyes. "It's a little better, thank you," Deborah replied. Rachel checked the 4 and handed Deborah a pill. "This is a painkiller prescribed by the doctor. Please take it with water." After Deborah took the medication, Rachel nodded with satisfaction, made some notes, and left the room. Michael followed, saying he needed to make a work call. Alone, Deborah was suddenly overcome with intense drowsiness. The painkiller seemed too strong. She tried to resist, but her eyelids grew heavy, and soon she fell into a deep sleep. When she awoke, a different nurse was in the room, holding Thomas. "Oh, you're awake. The baby was hungry, so I've been holding him." Deborah looked at the clock. It was past noon. She had slept for 4 hours. A normal painkiller shouldn't have made her sleep so long. "The medication seems to have had a strong effect on me," Deborah said, her head still foggy. "Yes, Rachel noted that in your chart. We'll adjust the dosage next time," the nurse said, handing the baby to Deborah. That afternoon, Deborah felt another change in her condition. This time it was sudden nausea and heart palpitations. She pressed the nurse call button, and Rachel appeared immediately. "What's wrong?" "I feel sick, and my heart is beating fast." Rachel took her blood pressure again and placed a hand on her forehead. "You might have a slight fever. Temporary fevers after childbirth aren't uncommon. I'll adjust the medication in your 4." She changed the 4 bag and made another note about Deborah's condition. As Rachel left the room, Deborah saw her take out a mobile phone and send a message to someone. In the evening, Carol brought Lily to visit. Lily's eyes sparkled when she first saw her little brother. Mom, Thomas is so tiny. Deborah gently embraced her daughter and kissed her hair. Yes, he is. But he'll grow bigger and bigger. I hope he becomes as smart as you. Carol looked at Deborah with concern. You look pale. Are you all right? Deborah told her about the changes in her condition and how the medication seemed too strong. Carol frowned. That's strange. Shouldn't you talk to your doctor about it? Just then, Rachel entered the room again. She showed an overly friendly attitude toward Lily. Oh, you must be Lily. I've heard so much about you from your mother. What a smart girl you are. Deborah was confused. She had never mentioned Lily to Rachel. Lily herself clearly felt uncomfortable and moved closer to her mother. I don't know this nurse, Lily whispered to Deborah. Rachel, seeming not to notice, said, It's medication time, and offered another pill. Deborah eyed the pill suspiciously but didn't want to cause a scene in front of Carol and Lily. She took the pill and waited for Rachel to leave. Carol, don't you think there's something strange about that nurse? Carol agreed. Yes, it was unnatural that she knew Lily's name. Lily left the room briefly, saying she wanted to get some water. When she returned, her expression was dark, as if she wanted to say something. When Carol excused herself to buy some food from the cafeteria, leaving Deborah and Lily alone, Lily approached her mother's bed and said in a low voice. Mom, I've seen that nurse before with Dad. Deborah's heart jumped. What do you mean? 2 weeks ago, Dad picked me up from school and took me for ice cream. I saw Dad and that woman talking at an outside table. They both looked serious. Deborah was speechless. Michael had said he would be working late that day. Lily had no reason to lie. That evening, after Michael's brief visit, Deborah heard him leave the room. However, he didn't immediately walk away down the hallway. Instead, she heard Michael talking quietly with someone in the corridor. She couldn't make out what was said, but it was definitely a woman's voice. That night, Deborah couldn't sleep. Anxiety and doubt occupied her mind. The next morning, Deborah gazed at the sunlight streaming through the window, nursing her restless thoughts. She had awakened several times during the night and hadn't slept well. In the bassinet next to her, Thomas breathed peacefully. Feeling the fragility and preciousness of this small life, Deborah reflected on what Lily had told her yesterday. I saw Dad with that nurse. Suspicions about Michael were eating away at her heart. She had sensed changes in his attitude before the birth, but she never imagined he might be involved with another woman, especially one who was her nurse. Deborah felt a headache coming on. The morning vital check was performed by a different nurse. She explained that Rachel would be on duty in the afternoon and checked Deborah's condition before leaving. The 4 was still running, but the painkiller dosage seemed to have been reduced, as Deborah's head felt clearer. In the morning, Deborah received a visit from her attending physician. The doctor seemed satisfied with her recovery but was concerned about the fever and nausea. Let's do another blood test, just to be safe. After the doctor left, Deborah picked up her mobile phone and hesitantly called Michael. He answered after the 3rd ring. Deborah, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? No, I'm fine, Deborah tried to sound calm. I just wanted to know if you could come with Lily when she visits today. On the other end of the line, Michael could be heard taking a sharp breath. That's difficult today. I have an important meeting. I understand, Deborah couldn't hide her disappointment. Talk to you later, then. After hanging up, Deborah sank deep into her bed, staring at the ceiling. Was her intuition correct? Or was this paranoia due to her postpartum mental state? At lunchtime, Rachel appeared. She acted as cheerfully as ever, but Deborah noticed that her eyes weren't smiling. Rachel brought the meal and another pill. This is an additional antibiotic prescribed by the doctor. It's to prevent infection. Deborah stared at the pill. She hadn't heard the doctor give such instructions during the morning rounds. Did my doctor say this? Rachel hesitated for a moment. Yes, of course. It's recorded in your chart. Deborah took the pill in her hand but didn't swallow it. I'll take it later. I want to eat first. Rachel briefly showed a dissatisfied expression but quickly composed herself. All right. I'll check back later. After Rachel left, Deborah hid the pill in the bedside table drawer. Her feeling that something was wrong was growing stronger. Around 2 in the afternoon, Carol brought Lily. Lily clutched a small bouquet and rushed to her mother. Deborah embraced her daughter tightly. Mom, are you okay? Lily looked up at her mother's face with concern. Yes, I'm fine, Deborah smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Carol picked up Thomas and, while rocking him, said, Deborah, I'm going to buy some drinks. What would you like, Lily? Apple juice. Lily answered enthusiastically. When Carol left the room, Lily's expression changed. She moved closer to her mother's bed and said in a low voice, Mom, I saw that nurse again today. She was talking with Dad in the hallway. Deborah's heart began to race. When? Just now. When we arrived at the hospital. They didn't notice us, Lily's eyes reflected fear. Mom, she had a scary face. Deborah squeezed her daughter's hand. Lily, what do you mean? Lily moved even closer to her mother and said in an almost inaudible voice, she told Dad, we'll do it today. Dad said, not yet. Mom, is she going to do something? Deborah caught her breath. Children's intuition is sharp. Lily had sensed something. Deborah herself had felt something unnatural about Rachel's behavior, the overly strong effect of the medicine, knowing Lily's name, and this morning's suspicious antibiotic. Suddenly, voices could be heard from the hallway. Lily quickly stood up and listened toward the window. Then, with a determined expression, she quietly began to draw the curtains in the hospital room. Lily, what are you doing? Without turning around, Lily said, Mom, she's coming. After closing the curtains, Lily rushed to her mother's bed and, with a small but serious expression, said, Mom, get under the bed right now. Deborah sensed her daughter's urgency and fear. Lily's eyes held a wisdom and determination beyond her years. Deborah acted without hesitation. She gently picked up Thomas, and dragging the 4 stand with her, stood beside the bed. Lily, you come too. She first knelt on the floor and, still holding the baby, carefully slid under the bed. Her postpartum body still felt pain, but she ignored it. Lily quickly crawled in beside her mother. As the two held their breath under the bed, they heard the hospital room door open. Quiet footsteps approached. Deborah gently rocked Thomas to prevent him from crying, while holding her breath. Lily clung to her mother's arm, trembling with fear. The footsteps stopped near the bed. There was a sound of someone touching the pillow on the bed. Where did she go? A woman's voice muttered. It was Rachel. Deborah's heart pounded violently. She suddenly felt Lily's small hand cover her mouth. Lily was warning her mother to stay quiet. Smart girl. Deborah nodded slightly and gently squeezed Lily's hand. Rachel seemed to have pressed the nurse call button. The patient is missing, they heard her say. Just then, another set of footsteps entered the room. Heavier ones, belonging to a man. What are you doing? Where's Deborah? It was Michael's voice. Rachel's voice came back, low and dangerously resonant. Your obstacle will soon be gone. With just 1 injection. What are you talking about? Michael's voice was disturbed. We planned this, Michael. You and me, and the baby. We don't need your wife. Rachel's voice had a tinge of madness. The baby will be ours. Deborah was frozen with terror. In her arms, Thomas began to stir. Deborah kissed the baby even more gently, praying he would stay quiet. Lily's face was pale, her eyes filled with fear, but she bravely remained still, trying to protect her mother and brother. From under the bed, Deborah could see Rachel's white nursing shoes and Michael's leather shoes. They were standing face to face. Michael's feet stepped backward. "What are you saying?" "I only said I wanted to break up. I don't intend to hurt anyone." A ray of light shone in Deborah's heart. While Michael had certainly been having an affair with Rachel, he didn't seem to be participating in this crazed plan. However, that hardly changed the current situation. Rachel had a syringe with a lethal dose of drugs, and she was looking for Deborah. "You promised. You said we would be together." Rachel's voice trembled with anger. Deborah looked at Lily's face. Along with fear, there was determination in her daughter's eyes. Lily gently pointed to her mother's arm, showing the watch-like nurse call button attached to it. Deborah understood and nodded slightly. It was a race against time. From their limited view under the bed, they could see Rachel's and Michael's feet still facing each other. "You promised me a future together." Rachel's voice was growing louder. "If she were gone, we could be a perfect family." "Are you crazy?" Michael's voice shook with anger. "I only said I wanted to end our affair. I never talked about hurting Deborah or Lily or the baby." Under the bed, Deborah stiffened at hearing her name. Beside her, Lily silently wept. Deborah gently embraced her daughter, trying to encourage her. Thomas remained with his eyes closed, barely breathing. "Break up. Break up with me." Rachel's voice turned cold and sharp. "Didn't you tell me things weren't going well with your wife? That you didn't want a second child?" "I did say that. But it was from pre-birth anxiety. The moment I saw Thomas, my thinking changed." Michael's voice had regained its composure. "Rachel, calm down. Nothing irreversible has happened yet. Put down that syringe, and let's talk." Deborah had complex feelings about her husband's words. She couldn't forgive his infidelity, but at least now he was trying to protect his family. Rachel's foot stepped forward. "It's too late, Michael. I've planned everything. Deborah's illness, the overdose of medication, it's all my doing. I've prepared it so no one will question if she dies from complications." Michael could be heard gasping. Are you sane? Love sometimes drives people mad." Rachel's voice had regained a strange calmness. "If you love me, you should understand. This is for our future." Deborah felt the blood in her body freezing. Rachel was completely insane. And she was desperately thinking of a way to escape this situation. She had pressed the nurse call button, but how long would it take for hospital staff to arrive? "Rachel, you're sick. You need help." Michael's feet stepped backward. "I will never allow you to hurt Deborah." "So?" Rachel's voice echoed coldly. "Then you're an obstacle too." Footsteps moved, and it seemed a struggle had begun between them. Deborah couldn't see what was happening, but she heard something fall to the floor. Michael let out a pained sound. "Rachel, stop." Lily's hand gripped Deborah's arm tightly. Deborah sensed her daughter's terror. She was trembling with fear herself, but she had to appear strong in front of Lily. Just then, the hospital room door was flung open. "Is everything all right?" The nurse called. Another nurse's voice could be heard. Then, a moment of silence, followed by a surprised voice. "Rachel? What are you doing? Don't interfere." Rachel shouted. "Security! Come quickly." The nurse called out into the hallway. Amid the confusion, multiple footsteps entered the room. Deborah held Lily tightly and protected Thomas. "She has a syringe," someone shouted. After some commotion, the room suddenly fell silent. "It's safe. We've restrained her," a man's voice announced. Deborah took a deep breath and made a decision. Lily, it's okay now. Let's come out. She slowly crawled out from under the bed. Holding Thomas in her arms and leading Lily by the hand, she stood up, met by the surprised expressions of everyone in the room. There were 2 nurses, 2 security staff, and Michael in the room. Michael's face had scratch marks, and his shirt was disheveled. Rachel was being restrained by security, struggling wildly. A syringe had fallen to the floor from her hand. Deborah. Michael was stunned. Under the bed. I hid with Mom, Lily said in a small voice. I was scared of that woman. Seeing the 2 of them, Rachel began struggling more violently. You ruined everything. We could have been happy. Security firmly restrained her and removed her from the room. The hospital administrator was called, and the institution was in an uproar over the gravity of the situation. Deborah, Lily, and Thomas were moved to another room. The police were called, and the syringe Rachel had been carrying was collected as evidence. Emergency tests show the contents of the syringe were a lethal dose of morphine, the hospital's medical safety manager explained to Deborah. Rachel Collins was hired by our hospital 2 months ago, but we've discovered she falsified her credentials. She apparently has a history of psychiatric hospitalization and caused similar problems at another hospital. Stroking Lily's hair with trembling hands, Deborah asked, "But why was I targeted?" According to the police's initial investigation, Collins had a brief relationship with your husband and gathered information about you and your family in the process, the manager explained apologetically. She arranged to be assigned to you and was targeting your delivery. Michael stood outside Deborah's new hospital room door. His face showed deep regret and shame. Deborah saw him but said nothing. Let me talk to you, Michael entered the room. I'll explain everything. Lily, could you wait outside for a bit? Deborah said gently to her daughter. Lily looked anxiously at her mother but nodded and left the room. I met Rachel 3 months ago, Michael began in a heavy tone. It was just a temporary mistake. I tried to end it a month ago, but she wouldn't accept it. However, I never thought she was this deranged. I can't believe it, Deborah's voice was cold. Your reckless behavior put our lives in danger. I know. I don't expect to be forgiven, Michael bowed his head. But for Lily and Thomas's sake, please let me try again. Deborah gazed out the window. Her heart was filled with the pain of betrayal, but at the same time, she felt deep gratitude that their lives had been saved by Lily's courage and quick thinking. I need time to think, she finally said. Right now, I just want to focus on the children. Michael nodded silently and left the room. 3 months later, Deborah sat on the small porch of her new home, watching Lily play in the garden. Baby Thomas slept peacefully in her arms. The new house was smaller than their previous one, but the warm sunshine and quiet environment surrounded by greenery were ideal for healing their wounded hearts. Rachel Collins had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and delusional disorder following a psychiatric evaluation and was confined to a state facility. Police investigations revealed that she had greatly exaggerated her brief relationship with Michael, even fantasizing about marriage and family planning. More surprisingly, she had caused similar problems at hospitals where she had previously worked but had concealed her record through credential falsification. Mom! Look, a butterfly! Lily called from the garden, stretching her small arms toward the sky. Deborah smiled. Lily was receiving psychological counseling twice a week but was gradually regaining her original brightness with the resilience typical of children. Though occasional anxious expressions remained, she had developed a pride in being a little hero. The divorce proceedings with Michael had been completed last month. He had quit his job and moved to a city on the West Coast. Child support was paid regularly, but he didn't come to see Thomas. It was arranged that he would talk to Lily once a month by phone. With the help of a lawyer, Deborah had successfully obtained sole custody of the children. Through Carol's introduction, Deborah had started working 3 days a week at the local library. The limited working hours gave her plenty of time to spend with her children and an opportunity to build relationships in the new community. The library's storytelling sessions had become her small joy. "Would you like some tea?" Carol appeared from the back door, holding 2 mugs. Since the incident, she had become Deborah's strong supporter, often visiting on weekends to help with housework and childcare. "Thank you," Deborah accepted the mug. "I couldn't have recovered without you." "Don't say that," Carol sat beside her. "You're stronger than you think. And so is Lily." Deborah gazed at her daughter running around in the garden. "She was truly brave. She saved our lives." Life is unpredictable and sometimes cruel. Deborah thought about the true meaning of family while contemplating this. It's not just about blood ties, but about bonds where people protect and trust each other. Through their great ordeal, a stronger bond had formed between her, Lily, and Thomas than before. "Mom!" Lily came running up. "Is Thomas awake? Can I hold him?" Deborah smiled and handed the small baby to her daughter. Lily carefully held her brother and gently kissed his forehead. "I'll always protect you," Lily whispered to her brother. As Deborah watched her 2 children, she felt hopeful about their future journey together, despite the uncertainties of the road ahead.